Hello, Mitzi Cruz here, host of Lincoln Live. We are very excited to bring some executive director of the Placer County
Transportation Planning Agency, or PCTPA. We have a very long name.
Yep,
yes.
I knew inevitably I was going to miss a portion of that title. So
that's okay. Everyone does. So, well, thank you very much for having us here today and to help outline. Take that information and plan the regional roadways in between the cities, and then work with the cities themselves on roadways within their cities, and go out and try to find funding for those projects, and then to eventually construct those projects.
So I know that there's a variety of projects that we're going to talk about today. How long has the planning process been in the works for these projects?
So with our regional roadways, which include mainly Interstate 80 and State Route Highway 65, those projects have been in the planning process for over 40 years.
Wow.
And like I mentioned earlier, the general plans for those cities plan for future growth and other beneficial development in those cities. And then the roadways were then planned for that growth back in the 70s and 80s, and continues on to today. And so the expansion of State Highway 65 and the expansion of Interstate 80 and other roadways like Placer Parkway have been in the works for a very, very long time, and we're simply at this point implementing the expansion of those roadways.
So where are we at as far as growth? Meaning, is the growth that you're seeing from city to city, is it in line with what was projected 40 years ago, or has it exceeded that growth? Or
so when we look at growth, we have to look at both regional growth, and with regional growth, it's actually our metropolitan planning area, which is composed of 6 counties, including Placer County. And so we look at the growth of that region, and in the next 40 or so years, that area is planned to grow by almost a million persons.
Wow.
In Placer County, we are in line with our growth, and our projected expansion in the next 50 years is approximately another 180,000 persons would be added to the existing population that we have today.
And the majority of that growth will actually occur in Lincoln, correct?
Well, actually, a lot of it will occur in Lincoln, but mainly in the cities of Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville is where most of the growth will occur, as well as some growth in the county unincorporated area.
Got it. So talk to us about the projects that are currently being planned and will be rolled out here within the next few years to alleviate the traffic that results from all of that growth?
Sure. Well, our largest project is the Interstate 80 Highway 65 Interchange. And as you know, we just finished the first phase of the construction of that project, which was completed last September. A project that was approximately $50 million to add a northbound lane from the interchange up to Pleasant Grove, and then also to expand the Galleria-Stanford Ranch intersection, the on-ramps and off-ramps, to their maximum build-out condition. That is the first phase of a four-phase project, which will actually eventually replace the interchange, the cloverleaf, if you will, with a large flyover structure that will accommodate the proposed increase in traffic over the next 30 years. From there, the next project moving northward is the widening of Highway 65, which we have planned to widen State Highway 65 from Pleasant Grove all the way to the city of Lincoln. And it'll be approximately 8 lanes, 4 lanes in each direction. The third project we have is we have worked a lot on relieving congestion on Interstate 80, and we have a couple remaining projects, but they're very important to relieve traffic congestion because they form bottlenecks because the lanes have to narrow down in 2 areas. And those 2 areas are the area between Douglas Boulevard and Riverside going in the westbound direction, and then the area between the Interchange and Rockland Road in the eastbound direction. So basically adding a lane in each location so that you don't have that neck down in traffic. And that's very important because as we have traffic coming during normal commute hours, but we also have traffic coming during weekend events where we have a lot of people going to and from Lake Tahoe, and that forms a pinch point, which makes traffic very bad in both of those locations. The last major project 2 other major projects we have. One is a new roadway called Parkway. And if you've ever traveled up Highway 65, you see at the Whitney Ranch interchange, it looks like it's half done. Well, that's where a new roadway is planned in Placer County called Placer Parkway, and that would go from that location at Whitney Ranch Parkway all the way over to State Route 99 in Sutter County, and that's a brand new limited access roadway. And then the last project we have is we're actually going to be widening Baseline Road from Roseville, from Foothills Boulevard west all the way to Highway 99 to 4 lanes and then eventually 6 lanes. So those are our big 5 projects that we have. So.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I was really excited to see phase 1 with the widening of 65 and excuse me, just the way that it has really relieved traffic in that area. And in regards to that flyover, I think that's a much safer option. It's a much more direct option. And again, I'm, I can speak from my perspective, right?
Sure.
I'm really excited about Placer Parkway as well. Where is that going to come out at in Sutter County?
It will come out at near Sankey Road, which is the first interchange north of Riego Road, which is where Baseline Riego Road enters into Highway 99. So about a mile north of there. So very, very important project. Our South Placer traffic operates as a system, and so you have to actually have all these roadways and the expansion of these roadways looking forward for the next 30 years or longer to relieve traffic congestion. You can't do one without the other. And we do them in a very methodical, phased approach. So we do the worst first and then the other projects in order to essentially address that traffic congestion. But even with, you mentioned the first phase of the 6580 interchange, that was good for about 2 months. And then we saw basically traffic come back to Highway 65, and now at about 5:30 p.m. in the evening, you see another agglomeration of traffic at Pleasant Grove, and the reason for that is because we need to widen 65 now.
Right.
So you can see it's a system. You basically change one, but you have to work on the next project almost immediately so that it doesn't just move the traffic northward to a different location.
So when will phase 2 begin?
Well, unfortunately, we're at a point where with the first phase of the 6580 interchange, we actually spent the last remaining dollars in total that we have for a major project in Placer County, in South Placer. And that's because in the former years, the state and federal government had a cost-sharing formula for projects. As you know, they own those roadways and they maintain those roadways. And dating all the way back to the Eisenhower administration in the 1950s, traditionally the federal government or state government would fund 90 or 80% of a project, and then we locals had to come up with 10 or 20%. And we were able to do that because we have things in place called development impact fees. And so when someone builds a house or they build commercial space, they pay an impact fee that goes to basically pay for that local match so that we can get the 80 or 90%. Well, what happened is the state and the federal government changed that funding formula from 80 to 90% to where they only fund 50% of the project, and we have to come up with 50%. And so what happened is that formed a gap in our funding. And we, like every other of the 58 counties in California, are charged by the federal and state government to fill that gap. And 25 other counties in California adopted local transportation sales tax measures to fill that gap. And we're actually the largest county, second largest county in California without such local funding to fill this gap. So we're in this unenviable position where we're actually having to come to our residents and ask for additional sales tax dollars to fill this gap. We wish we didn't have to, but the way the state and the federal government changed this funding formula puts us in a pickle because we don't have that local match. And because of that, these great projects that we have designed and are ready to go, we are on hold until we can find that funding source.
So, excuse me, and I apologize, I've had a frog in my throat all day. One of the things that we did in preparation of this interview is we had asked our audience for questions. And so there were a couple questions in regards to funding and things like that, one of them being Measure M. What was the specific question in regards to that?
I could pull it up, but if you want to start talking about funding, I'll get it ready for you.
Okay. So a transportation project is funded, if you will, in a partnership between the state and the federal government and the local government, and so we seek out those dollars, whether they be through grants or other programs through the state and the federal government, and then we take our matching funds and we go to them and we say, we have a project that's shovel ready, that's ready to build. Here is our match, and then they will essentially provide their share of funding and the project is built. And what's happening now is we're competing with the other 25 California counties, so we go to the table, and an example we use a lot is County has their own transportation sales tax measure, and we seem to be going up against San Mateo sometimes, and we will say, here's our 20% from our developer impact fees,
right, and
San Mateo will say, well, here's our 50%, and we lose to San Mateo County every single time, because really it comes down to dollars and cents, and those that come up with the required match get their projects funding. Those that don't receive any funding.
Right.
And there is no incremental way to do that either, because there is no funding left. A few years ago, maybe there was a few dollars left after the folks that had the 50% were done, and then we'd have a little bit left over for us. But
Sure.
Now the money runs out every single time, and we can't compete against these other counties.
And how frequently does that process occur, where you're able to take our how frequently do you get to go before the state and ask them for those funds?
It's different for different programs, but we're actually constantly submitting applications for funding to these state and federal programs. Some of them occur annually, some of them occur every 2 years, and we're constantly designing our projects to fit those programs. And we and the other California counties have actually lobbied very hard to get this 50-50 match back to its original 80-20.
Right.
But we have had, over the last 5 to 7 years, no luck in doing that. And now, with 25 other counties in California coming up with that match, essentially our chance to change that has eroded entirely. We'll never be able to go back to that 80-20 or 90-10 match.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, if other counties are able to do that, then why would the state revert back?
Correct.
It just doesn't make sense.
Correct.
So I know that some people have they confuse like the gas tax with a source of funding for projects like these. So maybe you can share with the difference.
Sure. So SB1, or the gas tax, which was adopted a couple of years ago by the state, and then it went through a recall election, Proposition 6, and it survived that recall election, essentially provides dollars to maintain what we have. And so it fixes our roadways, it fixes our potholes, and it also addresses transit to some extent. And that's a very necessary part of our roadway system, to essentially fix things first and keep what we have in good repair.
Right.
But unfortunately, the state could not agree on how it would fund expansions of our roadways. So the gas tax works very good, and our county receives approximately $20 million a year to fund roadway repair and transit repair, or transit expansion.
Sure.
But we have a backlog, unfortunately, of about $1 billion in roadway expansion, because it took the state a very, very long time to even agree on that. And so those dollars, although maybe they seem small in size to that $1 billion backlog, are very necessary to keep our roads in good repair. But we can't use any of the gas tax funds to expand our roadway system. So to build the 80-65 interchange, or to widen Highway 65, or to widen Interstate 80, or Placer Parkway, or Baseline Road, we are not allowed to use any of those dollars for that purpose.
Yeah, and I think that really clarifies for a lot of folks who, like I said, the understanding just necessarily isn't there. And that's not to say that, obviously there's people on different sides of the coin, right? Some people are really in support of the 0.5% sales tax in order to fund projects like these, and then you've got other people who are concerned about an additional tax and what that's going to look like. So maybe you can share the difference between that tax being allocated as like a property tax versus a sales tax.
Sure.
And why it's structured that way.
And as I said at the beginning, we are a fiscally conservative county. I've lived here for 27 years, and I would consider myself a fiscal conservative as well. And so we hate to come to you and say, well, we need more sales tax dollars to fund these projects, but as we talked about earlier, it's something we don't have much choice at.
Right.
And essentially, California to fund this local gap gives you two ways to do it, and only two ways. And those two ways are a sales tax measure, and then the other way is a parcel tax. And our board was very clear that they didn't think a parcel tax was fair for the property tax owners for Placer County.
Right.
And the reason being is because we have a lot of people that visit our county, that shop and work in our county, but live somewhere else.
Right.
And they create an impact on our roadway system. And if it was funded only by Placer County property tax owners, that wouldn't be fair, because they're footing the bill for other people. So we looked at sales tax, and sales tax, 25 to 30% of the sales tax that's generated in Placer County comes from people that live outside our region or are traveling through our region. And so we are able to capture that 25 to 30% and use that and not put that burden on local property owners here in Placer County entirely. So
that makes a lot of sense. And so, Carlin, did you have the question queued there?
And there's a good chance you kind of already explained this,
Sure.
But just as a quick recap, are there any other measures being taken to address these issues other than Measure M?
Yes, and so I mentioned earlier that the development community pays for a significant portion of transportation projects in the county, and we have developed a regional impact fee called the South Placer Transportation Authority, Tier 1 and Tier 2 fee, and development essentially pays into those. And developers and builders, they pay in Placer County the maximum extent allowed by law.
Wow.
And so they have come up with essentially about $2 billion of the $3 billion in roadway improvements that are needed for the next 3 years. And that gap, if you will, is the $1 billion that we are seeking with this sales tax measure. So that's, in California, one of the only ways left to fund transportation is through development impact fees.
Right.
But we can only really require a builder to pay for the impact that he or she creates. And we've done that in Placer. They pay a very, very high rate of impact fees for transportation. And we've really looked at every other state and federal program, but they're all moving towards this 50-50 match. So every time we find a new program, when we compete for that, we have to come up with that 50% match or we're not even looked at.
So do you believe that other communities and other counties, rather, who have looked at measures such as Measure M have seen kind of a lot of backlash from the community, or people that aren't necessarily wanting to get on board with that? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the concern that people have, and we've done polling here in Placer County of residents to see what that concern is composed of.
Right.
And it seems to be composed of the fact that the state of California mainly says they will charge a fee or a tax for one thing, and then will take that fee or tax and use it for another thing. And actually, in California, it's ironic that local government is actually held to a much higher standard than the state of California when it comes to transportation dollars and sales taxes and property taxes. We actually are required by law to spend it on what we say what we ask it for.
Sure.
And so in our in this funding strategy, we actually have what's called an expenditure plan or an investment plan. And it spells out exactly how much is needed and exactly what projects or type of projects that we're going to fund through this program, and that's based upon a needs assessment we've done for the next 30 years. We have to spend it exactly on those projects. We can't take it and go, oh, well, we're going to spend it on something else. We have to fund it only on those items. But we've taken it actually a step further, and we've said we're going to do a professional audit. So we're going to hire a professional audit firm to come in every single year and basically do an audit like you would audit a business or you audit another form of government. And they'll put their professional reputation on the line to say, yes, PCTPA is funding these projects like they said they would. But then we're actually going to take it even one step further, and our board said we would like to have a citizen oversight committee to basically review what PCTPA does, review this audit, and make sure they spend it on what they say they're going to. And so our board and the city councils of the 4 cities will appoint 2 citizens from each of the 3 cities, Rockland, Roseville, and Lincoln, and a member from the county to sit on a board that will review every single dollar that we spend.
So a couple questions that come to mind. Number one, who actually manages those funds?
So PCTPA, or Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, is made up of, we're a special district made up of the cities and the county. And so there's a representative from each city council on our board, and also a member of the public. And so this 9-member board, and 2 from the County Board of Supervisors. So this 9-member board, their job is to manage those dollars and those projects properly on behalf of their own city council or board of supervisors or the citizens of Placer County, and it's essentially their responsibility to do that. And we are professional staff to those to that board of directors, and that board of directors meets the 4th Wednesday of every month, and has public meetings that people can come and say, they like what we're doing, they don't like what we're doing, and really look at everything that we do. It's an open book.
So there's some serious accountability, checks and balances. That's all in place. So people need not worry about anything in regards to the appropriation of the funds once they're generated.
Yeah, there were already a lot of checks and balances in place, but our board said we want to do more, because Placer County is. One thing I've learned in my 27 years living here, is that Placer County is all about local control of its resources and its policies and priorities. And so our board said, let's take it a step farther, and let's have a professional audit, and let's have a citizens oversight committee to look at how these sales tax dollars would be spent.
So my second question was in regards to the Citizens Oversight Committee. What is the process if someone's watching and they're interested in getting involved in that? How do they go about applying?
So we don't have an application process yet, because what we have to do next is our board will have to decide whether to put the measure on the ballot or not, and then the citizens of the 3 cities will get a chance to vote on it come November. And then at that time, if they vote positively for this measure, then we will open up a process, and we'll have a large notification and notify residents in all 3 cities and the county that they can apply. But if they're interested now, I would say you can contact me at pctpa.net is our web address, and you can find my email address on there, or you can send your mayor or your chair of the Board of Supervisors an email or a letter now saying that you're interested. We'd be glad to get people lined up to be part of this very important project.
Yes, I agree. Very, very important. And everything that you've shared has just been wonderful. I think it's very eye-opening for everybody watching. So you've seen the show. You know that we like to open up the discussion to the audience. So who's watching, and what questions do you guys have?
I think you guys answered pretty much all the questions that people would have, because no one's really commented. But one I can think of that viewers would want to know is more like the timeline. So what's more like instant gratification, and what's long term? Like, what are we looking at?
Sure. So our board said if we're going to go down this road to look at a sales tax measure, we want to make sure that we demonstrate to the residents of Placer County that we are going to make it a measurable impact immediately. And so what we've been doing is getting the next phase of these projects shovel ready. And so doing the environmental review and doing the final design of these projects. And so if this measure were to be put on the November 2020 ballot and approved by the residents of Placer County, you would immediately see construction of the expansion of State Highway 65 immediately. You would also see the 2 remaining bottlenecks on Interstate 80 done immediately, and a number of other smaller projects, but those are the 2 biggest ones that they would immediately go to construction.
Got it.
So.
And I know that you have some really informative brochures that talk about the projects and then some other benefits as well.
Sure.
So why don't you talk to everybody about the added safety and security for children who are going to school and things like that? Sure.
So I mentioned roadway projects a lot, but there's a lot of other modes of travel that are in our expansion plan. It does address our largest need, which is roadways. But what it also does is it also sets aside 25% of the funding for projects for each city, and so each city will receive 25% of the total amount of the expenditure plan to basically fund expansions of their roadways. So in Lincoln, the city of Lincoln has identified the expansion of McBean Parkway, Ferrari Ranch Road, the Nelson Road Interchange, and the Nicholas Interchange as key projects that they would use the dollars set aside for the city of Lincoln for. So those are very important projects. There's also two other types of projects in our plan. One are transit projects, and we only have in our expenditure plan transit projects that make sense for Placer County. So we're not building the bullet train or anything silly like that. We are basically funding commuter transit. Right now, our commuter buses that go to downtown Sacramento are full to the brim. You essentially have to stand if you want to take a bus from Lincoln or Roseville to downtown Sacramento. So we're going to have more of those. We are going to have more senior transit, so the dial-a-ride service and other senior services for transit. And then we'll take a look at maybe some innovative forms of transit, such as microtransit, which is a kind of a combination of a super shuttle and an Uber, where you can call a bus on demand with your smartphone or by phone, and call that bus to a location near where you're going, and it'll take you exactly to where you want to go. So we're going to be looking at some innovative is for what we call alternative modes, or in other words, bicycle and pedestrian improvements. And that's where you mentioned safe routes to schools.
Yes.
That funding can be used not only to do our bicycle and pedestrian trails that we have throughout our community, but can also be used for when there's a sidewalk missing from one neighborhood to a school, or where there's a missing crosswalk, or where some other safety improvement needs to be made to our schools. And we're working very closely in Lincoln with Western Placer Unified School District to identify those needed safe routes to schools, as well as the other school districts in South Placer County, to identify projects that those dollars can be applied for.
That's wonderful. I know as a parent and having children of all different ages, safety is, my biggest concern when my kids leave to go to school on their bike. I'm concerned about, drivers paying attention and them having the appropriate space that they need so that they can be safe.
Right.
That really addresses a big concern that I personally have. So.
Right. Yes. If we're going to get parents and to essentially allow their children to ride a bike or to walk to school, we have to have safe routes for them to go. And this program sets aside specific dollars for that purpose.
That's wonderful. And do we have any additional questions? Any additional comments?
There was one question about how this would affect different varying forms of income, people with different family incomes, how the tax would affect it. So if that's something you could attest to, that would be great.
Sure. It would be a half-cent sales tax, and we are looking at the sales tax lasting for a period of 30 years, and we do that in order to plan for future transportation needs, so we don't have to come back to residents every few years and ask for it again. So we're trying to project the need out for 30 years. And what that would translate to, so a lot of people, they say, well, a half-cent sales tax measure, what does that mean to me?
Right.
And it's essentially $5 per household per month, or $60 per year per household in South Placer County. And we know that all these taxes add up, but a lot of folks have told us they think that makes that $5 is a good investment in our infrastructure to ensure that we have traffic congestion relief, and so that we have things like safe routes to schools and good transit, and our roadways are in good repair.
Well, yeah, and I mean, really looking at it holistically, if it's even reducing consumption of gas for people's vehicles, keeping Placer County a very desirable place to live, because people aren't looking at traffic as a deterrent from moving to the area. Really, you got to look at the whole umbrella.
And a great point. One of the things that we looked at also is emergency response.
Right.
And we work very closely with our first responders, fire department, the police department, and the ambulance services of Placer County when we were designing this funding strategy. And they told us, we need you to address this traffic, because traffic, to the average person, it's a hassle.
Sure.
You get to work late, or you get to your appointment late, or you get to your son's baseball practice late, and that's a hassle. But it's actually a real life safety thing, because if we don't do these improvements, that ambulance that is going from that accident on 65 and 12 Bridges off-ramp, for example, to get that ambulance to the Kaiser Hospital in Roseville, if we don't do these improvements, right now it could take, on a busy traffic day, say Thursday afternoon, which is our busiest traffic day, that can take almost 45 minutes to get to the hospital.
Wow.
That's with today, with the current situation. If we don't do these improvements, our traffic engineers are telling us that it could take double or quadruple the amount of time to get to the hospital, and that's very serious.
Yeah.
And you can look at our website, and we have some information from our first responders and some videos that explain that. But that's really a life could be saved in the time it takes to get to the hospital. So we don't want to mess around with that at all. And another reason why we need these improvements.
No, I totally understand. So if somebody watching wants to learn more, where would they go to learn more?
So we have a very easy, unlike our name, we have a very easy website to remember, and that's keepplacermoving.com. And you can go to that website, and it'll tell you a ton of information about what we are planning and why there is a need for this funding for South Placer County. So, and you can learn a lot more about transportation planning agencies if you want as well. So.
Sure. So that's keepplacermoving.com for everybody who's watching. Definitely hop on there and learn everything that you can, and I'm sure there's also an opportunity to ask questions there as well.
Absolutely. Yes, you can ask a question by email, or you can call us at our office number anytime, and we'd be happy to talk any of this over with anyone.
Well, Mike, this has been extremely informative. I really appreciate it. Did you have any final thoughts or anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Nothing other than our board is later this month is going to make a very critical decision on March 25th at our board to decide whether or not to put this measure on the ballot. And I just want to assure that residents and voters of Placer County know that they will vote on this. There's nothing that we can do unilaterally to enact the sales tax measure. It's a special tax, and so it requires 2/3 of the electorate to vote for it. And rest assured that the voters will be given a chance to decide whether this is important or not.
Got it. And I also wanted to just chat about the raffle.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I was so enthralled in our conversation that I almost forgot about the raffle. So for those of you guys who are watching, you know how this works. You're going to share this live video by noon tomorrow. You're going to comment, share it in the comments below. You're also going to like the video, and that will get you entered into a raffle. And so why don't you tell everybody what you guys are
Sure.
donating?
So we're donating a $50 Uber gift certificate. And this is actually important to transportation in Placer County because, as you know, we now have a new transportation option with Uber and Lyft to get to where we want to go. And so we are utilizing this service when transit isn't a good fit for a particular part of the community. Uber or Lyft might be the best option for you, and so we're looking at some innovative ways to use Uber and Lyft, whether they be for Sierra College students or other persons, to get them to and from where they need to go without jumping in their car. So.
Got it, which overall reduces traffic impact again.
Yep.
That's great.
So we're glad to provide this to your viewers, and we wish good luck to whoever wins this prize. So.
Definitely. No, we appreciate it. So share the video, comment, shared, like our video, and then do all of those things by noon tomorrow, and we will go ahead and select a winner. And we wish you all good luck. It's $50 for Uber. And I just really want to thank you for your time today and for all the wonderful information that you've shared.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having us on your show.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for watching. You have a wonderful day.